Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. In this one I want to review the new Star Wars novel that has come out, the first High Republic novel that I've read, and that is the junior novel, middle grade novel, whatever way you want to call it, Star Wars The High Republic, A Test of Courage. So it was one of a few things in the High Republic that was released today, the other one being the proper novel Light of the Jedi, which I will be starting later on, and I will be doing a review for that hopefully later in the week, but we'll see when I get to finishing it. I started with this because I had a hard time actually getting a hold of the books and them arriving on the release day, so I had to go to the audiobook to actually just read it basically. So I went to this first because it's a smaller book, so about a just under 5-hour audiobook, and I got through it. So yeah, this is my first experience with the High Republic. I was aware of the general news about the High Republic, but I didn't look too in depth into a lot of the sort of preview material that they put out, like going over specific characters or anything like that. I kind of wanted to just experience it as it happened and only look at the basic general pieces of information that we had. So this was an interesting experience, new kind of era of Star Wars and jumping straight in with the kind of junior novel. So obviously we're not getting a ton of world building, a ton of depth here. This is definitely a book I would say is more of a character piece, and the main takeaway from this is definitely hyping up and making you aware of the main character of this book, who is Jedi Knight Vernestra Rwoh, I think is how you pronounce it, or W-O-H. I think the W is meant to be silent, so like Rwoh. And yeah, Vernestra is a really, really interesting character. She's this 16-year-old Jedi Knight, so she's completed her trials. She is seen by everyone as being a prodigy, at that she's the first in like a generation to complete the trials and become a full knight at such a young age. And that's the main thing I would say from this book, is just like, yeah, this character is going to be important going forward. Not necessarily for anything particular I would say she does in this book, but this book is just a proof for, they're not just telling you that she's like really good, but they're showing you that in a situation like this, she handles herself very well, and we're getting across that, this is an era where it's sort of the, it's meant to be the Jedi at their peak. There's no sense that they have the dark side has clouded the Force or anything like that. No, it's a golden age. It's the age of the Republic. The Republic is expanding really well. They're doing their best to include everyone. That's what this is meant to be, this sort of golden age of everything, including the Jedi, and the fact that they have such incredible up and coming young Jedi is another highlight of this era. The other characters, again, I think they also do pretty strong setup with. As you'd expect from a junior novel, the main characters are mostly kids. Vernestra is the oldest of the group that we get in this book. She's 16. We have Imri, who I think they say is 14 at a certain point in the book. He's a Jedi Padawan. We have Avon, who is 12. And Honesty, who is also 12, I believe, and they are both the daughter and son of Avon. I think is the daughter of a senator in the Republic, and Honesty is the daughter of the son of the ambassador for the planet Dalnan to the Republic, because I think the idea here is that Dalnan is negotiating with the Republic to become part of it. So that's why we're dealing with more of the sort of the sort of expansion of the Republic. So this is one on the sort of, I suppose, current outer rim. So that's where the negotiations are happening here, and the general idea of how the sort of plot in this book takes place is that one of Vernestra's first missions as a full-on Jedi Knight is to basically escort and be the sort of guardian over Avon as she is transferred from this outpost basically to this main space station, which is the Starlight Beacon, which if you've looked into the material about the High Republic, you'll know is kind of a center point of sort of what the era is trying to accomplish. Of like, the Republic is actually at this era caring about the Outer Rim. So the Starlight Beacon is meant to be this giant space station that is sort of like a remote outpost for the Republic away from the core systems, so that if they want to get Republic aid out to one of the Outer Rim systems, they can send it from the Starlight Beacon. At least that's how it's explained in this book. I believe that's covered more in Light of the Jedi, which, like I said, I haven't got to yet. The main plot obviously happens when the ship that they're on, the Steady Wing, there's an explosion shortly after they take off, and the group of kids and teens are forced to crash land on a nearby moon, and that's where most of the book takes place, with the group trying to work together to survive, and then also deal with a couple of Nihil bandits, whatever way you want to call them. This book, I would not say, goes into particular depth on what the Nihil actually are necessarily. They cover it a little bit, but again, I think they're leaving the most of the exploration of the Nihil up to Light of the Jedi to cover what they're really about, as well as, I suppose, the preview material if you want to read into it. Again, another reason I'd say they're not particularly the focus here is because I think there's two main characters here who are Nihil in this book, and they really are meant to just be thugs. That it's a reasonable challenge for our group of teens to deal with, but it's not meant to be like this massive threat against them. It's meant to be a pretty low-key thing of them just surviving on the planet, and then, basically, what should they do? How do they deal with these two Nihil that are the ones who sabotaged the ship? And that creates some of the drama of the book. For a junior novel, it actually sort of explained a few of the general ideas of the High Republic era a little bit better than I thought they would. I still definitely want more of the depth, and I'm excited to read Light of the Jedi now after starting off with this book. So I definitely say this is a solid, just really easy read. That's not particularly complicated. That's just fun. And yeah, there's a few details I want to get into, but I'll leave that for the sort of spoiler section. So just in terms of, I suppose, final non-spoiler thoughts, I would actually recommend this. Obviously, don't go out of your way to spend tons of money on this book necessarily, but I think it's worth reading, and I think Vernestra is being set up as she is going to be sort of a key character for the High Republic era in terms of this new generation of Jedi sort of coming through. And I'm excited to see what they do with this, because they do have the potential now, like I suppose over the next 10 years of books, novels, comics, whatever, to cover details of this character and see her grow to potentially being a Jedi Master, being on the Council or whatever, because they have such an interesting era to set up. But we'll see where they go with it. So yeah, the dynamics between the characters I thought were pretty good. The basic idea here you get, like I said, is Vernestra is, it's her dealing with her first sort of command in a way, being put in charge of this mission, which initially she felt was kind of beyond her station as a knight, to just babysit a 12-year-old basically on a on a kind of brief transportation from one basically station to another. But it actually turns into a bit of a survival mission where she actually gets to show her leadership skills. So that's just showing how competent she is as a character. With Imri, the basic idea with him is that they cover he is the Padawan of an actual Jedi Master, and in the middle of the explosion, he sort of sacrifices himself. He isn't killed at that exact point, but he aids the younger characters in getting to the last escape pod. But he has to stay behind, and the ship obviously kind of explodes. So he's gone, and it's Imri dealing with the loss of his master, which is a pretty interesting kind of arc for the character, in that he feels he's not good enough as a Padawan, in that he felt like his master, Master Douglas Sunvale is the name of that character. He feels he was almost lucky to be chosen by this Jedi, that he was maybe one of the weaker ones in his class, and he doesn't show as much skill as a lot of the other recruits. In many ways, it feels like he's like an opposite of how much of a prodigy Vernestra is, whereas Imri is kind of struggling to be that good, and happened to find someone who he gels well with as a master, and he feels if he has to go and potentially be chosen by another master, it might actually not happen again, and he's worried basically about potentially, going to like whatever they do with the Jedi who sort of fall out of the typical system. It was in the old EU, it was like the Agri Corps. He's basically worried about becoming that sort of a thing, and so there's a pretty cool dynamic with him. The general thing with him is that the unique ability that he has is that he has they at one point say he's an empath. I'm not sure if that's meant to be like a technical term necessarily, but through the Force, he connects very heavily with other people's emotions, and that seems to be the real important thing with him as a character. They kind of contrast his skill with the Force of sensing people's emotions versus he's not actually the best at like communicating with people, so he tends to rely more on judging how people feel through the Force and going from there rather than the other way around, and that's maybe a little bit of a problem for him. Yvonne is I might be pronouncing her name wrong. The narrator in the audiobook said it a few different ways, so my pronunciation's a little bit all over the place on that. But she obviously her arc is more dealing with the fact that already before the whole crash landing on a planet, she felt like she was sort of almost being like abandoned in a way by her mother, who's an important senator, that she's just basically sent to live on this remote outpost with this droid to look after her, and that she doesn't really get to see her mother all that much. And then later on in the book you sort of find out that there's a whole extra layer to this, and she's perhaps a character who focuses a little bit too much maybe on the science side of things and not enough maybe on the emotional side of things, and so wasn't really able to sort of properly read her mother's intentions for her, and kind of has to realize that no, her mother actually does care about her a lot, that she's just looking at everything from one perspective, whereas if you look at it from another perspective, her mother has given her a decent amount of freedom, but is also very protective of her. And it shows just a deeper understanding between them. Again, I thought she was a fun character. She's like an inventor. She's really into science. And so, you create this situation where you sort of have the leader Jedi in Vernestra. Imri is sort of kind of almost second in command, but he loses so much of his confidence without his master there that, he's not much use in a lot of situations. Yvonne then sort of gets to step up and be the sort of, tech support member of the team, and she's brought some small droids with her, and she gets to work on little bits of technology. And then Honesty, the ambassador's son, he ends up being sort of almost the more survival expert, because he's done some training to be a combat medic. So he knows how to use a blaster so they can defend themselves, and little bits and pieces like that. That he knows the correct procedure for trying to find food out in the field, and what is going to be non-poisonous and so on. So he ends up being reasonably useful, but sort of like Imri, he is a character who's also affected by the death of someone on the Steady Wing blowing up. In that case, I believe it's his father who dies. So Imri's dealing with the loss of his master, and then Honesty is dealing with the loss of his father. And once they find out, this is probably getting into spoilers here, so I'll basically start the spoiler section here for pretty much everything that happens in, I suppose, the second half of the book. Again, it's a small book. I don't particularly feel like I need to avoid spoilers all that much, because I don't really feel like the book has too much stuff that isn't just character-focused stuff. So the basic idea is that they end up, after surviving for a while, encountering the Nihil, and like secretly finding out that they were the ones who blew up the ship and they're looking for them. So now that they found out like who is responsible for the death of these people close to them, it's all about basically the reaction of these characters. And Honesty takes this very badly. He wants revenge. He wants to go after them and kill them and, you know, achieve revenge for his father. It's this kind of big contrast to him otherwise being a little bit meek in some ways, but all of a sudden this rage just comes out from him once he finds this out. And then Imri, who you kind of felt has been like, okay, he's been dealing with this in a way where like he's obviously upset about the loss of his master, but because he's around Honesty and he is an empath, the rage and anger from Honesty is almost like transferred to Imri. So he sort of feels part of this, but not as strongly as Honesty, and it just turns him into this situation where we're all of a sudden dealing with Imri potentially falling to the dark side, going down the path of anger, rage, in terms of he kind of ends up wanting to agree with Honesty with the quest for revenge. And it's like, how much of this is himself and how much of this is transferred from Honesty is, I suppose, the main question. And again, another interesting detail in this book with Imri is that they established that he has this weird thing with his lightsaber where his lightsaber is weak. Like, it works, but everyone can see that the blade is just weak. It can't cut through typical things a lightsaber could cut through. So it's useful for cutting through the plants in the jungle, but it can't cut through like steel or metal or anything like that. And they established that it's some sort of a problem with the construction of his lightsaber. Now, interestingly, his lightsaber gets sort of like destroyed over the course of this book, and so I guess he's going to build a new one as we go forward, and it will probably work now that he's maybe past his poor dealing with the loss of his master here. But I just thought that was quite interesting because they also, with Vernestra, one of the interesting things they did with her was again related to her lightsaber. One, her lightsaber is, I think they say the color is lavender in the audio, but basically if you've seen the cover image, it's a purple lightsaber. So she has the Mace Windu color lightsaber. And I kind of, it actually fits the character because she is such a prodigy. Like, becoming a full-on knight at 15 and now at 16 going on her first mission, and how, skilled and competent throughout the whole thing it seems. The only doubt she really has is like, is she ready for this yet? But she really proves herself throughout the whole thing. And the main dynamic between her and Imri is how she deals with him struggling with his emotions and potential fall to the dark side. And it results actually in the two of them fighting. Now, it's clear from the get-go, like, she's in complete control. There's no danger of her being killed or injured by Imri. She's in complete control. But how does she, get through to him that you are falling to the dark side? You need to stop this. This isn't you. This isn't the Jedi way to go about it this way. And she ends up, kind of just like defeating him, but also just showing an understanding for his situation, but also realizing she has to, take any way he can hurt people away. So she is the one who destroys his lightsaber. Because one of the other things is that they revealed that relatively recently, she has modified her own lightsaber to have it also work as a light whip, so she can activate it and transform it into a light whip. And they established that she did this because she saw it in a kind of dream or vision, and recently has changed her lightsaber to work this way and has been training in secret to also be skilled at using it as a light whip. They briefly cover some history on that because I don't actually know how much light whip stuff is or is not canon anymore, but obviously in the old EU, the light whips were a thing. They established here that it's more of a weapon of the past, Old Republic. They mentioned the Sith Wars get dropped, which I guess is Army of Sith versus Army of Jedi. Again, the fact that the whole EU is gone makes me kind of be like, okay, are they talking about the sort of pre-Rule of Two Sith there? I'm guessing they are. And so it's more of a weapon from the past that now has potentially gone on to have the reputation of being more of a Sith weapon than a Jedi weapon, so that's a little bit of a thing of like, okay. Typically people who have a purple lightsaber, it's usually like a signifier of skill, or characters who maybe edge a little bit close to the dark side of the Force. But again, depending on what is and is not canon, that is or is not the case. But either way, they seem to note that as a pretty impressive thing, that she's quite skilled with it as a light whip or lightsaber. But, you know, interesting thing to give to the character. So she destroys his lightsaber, but at the end of the book, they obviously managed to escape. They're eventually rescued by some of the other Jedi coming in. They managed to take the Nihil hostage, and it's not really much of a dramatic situation. What happens is that Imri and Honesty team up together to get revenge, but immediately get caught, and then Vernestra and Yvonne have to go and try and free them, which they do. And pretty much, there's also a droid with them. It's Yvonne's droid who looks after her, who's revealed to actually have all this weaponry, which is another thing that doubles down on, like, oh, my mom does actually care for me because she, like, fitted this droid to have all this weaponry. And that shows that she's not just sort of sent me away to be out of the way, but it shows a sense for, like, she does care for her safety a lot. Because there's a bit of a backstory where one day she got into trouble because she took down the security force field around her home house on Hosnian Prime, and she was kidnapped because she let the security field down. And after this, she's always gotten the sense that her mother's been sort of pushing her away as punishment for her being sort of, rebellious and going off on her own little adventures. But she's almost been sent away to keep her away from the danger that often accompanies a senator. That's the kind of dynamic that they're going for. And it works pretty well. Again, the arcs for these characters are covered like relatively quickly within the book, but it's something that adds to the general core dynamic. So anyway, everyone is saved. None of the main cast here, these four characters, dies or anything like that. They're saved. And in the aftermath of this, Imri is kind of non-responsive in a way. He feels terrible about, one, going with Honesty and doing this crazy thing, getting themselves captured. But then, even worse, he feels terrible because he was the one who attacked Vernestra. That he wanted revenge so badly that he was willing to fight a fellow Jedi to do that. Now, obviously, he lost pretty badly here, got his lightsaber broken and taken away, and was defeated by her ultimately. But he just feels that, like, okay, the darkness sort of fades away. But he feels that this mistake, on top of the fact that his master is gone, and what I discussed earlier about the fact that he really doubts anyone will choose him again, he just feels it's all over for him as a Jedi. Vernestra then talks to the Jedi Master who, led the sort of rescue mission to save them. And they basically have this discussion, like, what's on her mind is Imri. She questions, like, did she do the right thing in terms of talking him down like that, fighting him when she had to? And she's so worried about him. And I was wondering, like, are they going to do what I think they're going to do? And they did, and I'm really happy that they did this in the book. And it's that the Master just basically says, you're a full-on Jedi Knight. Yes, you're young, but why don't you take him as your Padawan? And she's taken aback by this because she's like, what? Because she still almost hasn't accepted herself that she is a full-on knight and that she handled herself like really well on this mission. And in my mind, especially, handled the Imri potential fall to the dark side very well. She stuck to the Jedi code and was the ideal Jedi, I suppose, in a way. In terms of being understanding for him and trying to protect everyone around them at the same time. And so her, who showed so much concern for him in this situation, is actually the perfect one to train him. And it's weird, it's sort of unconventional because she is so young, but it's not a mistake that she passed the trials. Knights are allowed to have Padawans, so what's the problem? And I'm so interested to see going forward, because the book basically ends at this point. That's one of like the last reveals, is that Vernestra is going to take Imri on as her Padawan, and she goes to say this to him, and he's so happy about that they're going to work on this together. Some other details are that Yvonne, obviously as the sort of engineer character, took an interest to lightsabers, and I think at some point earlier on in the book, Imri explained to her how a lightsaber worked. She takes the broken remains of Imri's lightsaber from Vernestra without her knowing, and she's going to use it for some reason. So I'm guessing this just means that whenever Yvonne shows up, she has a lightsaber with her that she will be able to use, because I'm assuming she'll be able to fix it properly. And even though Imri's lightsaber had some sort of a problem with it, I'm guessing she fixes it. So I believe there's a YA book coming out featuring at least some of these characters. I know Vernestra is going to be in it. I'm not sure about the other characters. So she might be in that as well. That would be a cool place for that to show up again. I question if Yvonne is going to be like revealed to be like Force sensitive or anything like that, but I'm guessing she'll just have a lightsaber and there'll be some sort of a plot related to that. Honesty, I almost actually don't really remember what exactly they do with him at the end. He has a bit of a weird relationship with Yvonne over the course of the book, in that there are moments when they get on really well, but then there are moments when they don't. Like, her being so far down the sort of science engineer path, she sort of struggles with how to approach him because he's just dealt with a loss. She doesn't really know exactly how nice or not she should be, and she says the wrong things a few times, but then also shows a kind of decent understanding of him. And so they sort of just come to the conclusion together by the end of this that, you know, he has got past some of his rage. He still wants revenge to a degree, but he mainly wants the Nihil dealt with. And so they set up this thing where Yvonne is going to speak to her mother to make sure that Honesty can speak to the Republic, the Senate, basically, on behalf of, you know, this situation and what happened. Because I suppose, to some degree, with his father dead, I suppose he becomes the sort of quote-unquote, you know, replacement ambassador for the planet Dalnan. So that makes sense. And it's just like another situation where here is something the Nihil did, and they're building up the Nihil as this massive threat. He'll give a speech about this incident that happened, that all these other people, except for these 4 characters, died in this bombing of this ship. That needs to be dealt with on top of everything else with the Nihil going on. So it's a decent setup for them. There is an epilogue right at the end featuring, I suppose, a higher-up member of the Nihil, where it's actually said, I think, earlier on in the book while it's still ongoing, because again, the Nihil are sort of covered in like the prologue and the epilogue, and then they're just like there as the villains right at the end to be defeated. So you don't really get too much from their perspective, but right at the end you do. And they cover this idea that the leader apparently is kind of like, okay, I've lost a lot of like lower level members of the Nihil. I need to increase recruitment. And she asked the question, like, on the planet, I think it's Dalnan, I think that's what she mentions, how many schools are there? And they're like, yeah, there's like 100 on the planet. Good. So the setup is that either they're going to be targeting Dalnan, or they're going to be recruiting from the youth of Dalnan into the Nihil, which I don't really know what I meant to take away from that. Again, maybe if I knew what the Nihil were a little bit better, that would have a bit more meaning. But if that's related to some sort of a plot that these characters are going to have to deal with going forward, I'm kind of cool with that. And honestly, like, just for me, right at the end, the simple thing of just a sort of young prodigy Jedi Knight taking on a Padawan of her own, when they're still relatively close in age, like she's only like 2 years older than him, but there is a gulf in skill between the two of them. That's kind of really interesting to me, just those two as a duo, Vernestra and Imri. I hope we get to see more of them going forward. And like I said, I wouldn't mind Vernestra being like a focus character of quite a bit of the new High Republic stuff going forward. Yeah, in terms of final thoughts, for a junior novel, I was pretty impressed by this, honestly. Did it quite have the world building you'd maybe expect? Not really, but it also wasn't just like super basic. Like, this is not like full on novel like Light of the Jedi. It's not like one of the upcoming YA books. It's like meant to be a level below that. But it actually felt closer to YA than I expected, which was a kind of pleasant surprise. And I think there's a decent amount of stuff here. So my first experience with the High Republic is actually, pretty positive overall. I don't really have many complaints. Apart from just that, maybe just this book in general. How much does it necessarily reveal about the specifics of the High Republic era? I'm not entirely sure, in that I think if you reworked some of this, you could have done something very similar to this, like set right before the prequels, or like in between episode 1 and 2. I don't think a lot of this is like inherently, like it only can take place in the High Republic era. Because I suppose this incident in particular, like the Nihil, are not really established, so it kind of could have been any two kind of random villain characters that they had to deal with. But a lot of the background stuff about, the Starlight Beacon, they touch on the whole Great Disaster situation, and they roughly explain that, some sort of a ship exploded in hyperspace, and the parts of it are randomly coming out of hyperspace at different points, so going through hyperspace is a bit of a chore because you have to kind of work around the affected routes, and that's what's going on. So, it fits in that sense, but this book itself, like, I suppose, like, I haven't read enough of the High Republic to even know if there is going to be, like, a particular, like, overarching story within it or not. But, like I said, this is more of a character book than the book necessarily being strong because of the plot. Because the plot is transport mission goes wrong, bombing, land on the planet, survive, and get rescued. The actual action and details of what happens there isn't particularly important. It's more about the characters and what they reveal to each other, their dynamics with each other, and what the book reveals individually about them. That's the final word I'll say on this. So, yeah, a test of courage, pretty positive. And pretty positive from the book that you'd maybe expect the least from, being the kind of middle grade book. So I've still got Light of the Jedi to read, and then I think coming out next month is the first YA book. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I've enjoyed some of the recent Star Wars YA books, so that should be pretty good too. So yeah, in the comments, if you've read this book, let me know what your thoughts were on it. But otherwise, if you have any questions, leave them below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.